me, guys, as I welcome our speaker of the day, in person of Engineer Kunle Oduobi. Yeah, thank you, sir. You have the floor.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. What an honor to be here. Really happy to be here. Thanks, everyone. And thanks to Metal Solutions and to everyone that is here to listen to my webinar today. Thank you. Thank you. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you
Yes,
clearly.
I can hear you clearly.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, so my name is Kunle Oduobi. I'm a QA engineer with Ecosia. Ecosia is a search company that plants trees around the world with the ad revenues that we get from our search results. So tonight I'm going to be speaking about how to effectively manage our time. Time is money, and we need to be able to have an account of what we've done with our time every day and be able to understand how we can improve on effectively delivering on our tasks. So I'm just going to share my screen right now. Give me a second. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, let's get started. All right, so the takeaways from this webinar is we're going to understand what time management is. We're going to understand the types of activities, the difference between efficiency and productivity, the various systems we can use to manage our time, how to manage meetings, and then understand the essence of having the budget for our time. All right, so time management. From the word, time management is not actually what time is itself, it's actually what we do with our time. So we need to be able to understand what we actually do with our time. And the things that we do with our time are the activities. So once you understand the fact that we're actually carrying out activities with our time, then we need to get them done. And then we need to understand how to prioritize them and then understand the amount of effort that will be required to achieve the results. So this is a breakdown of what time management is. It's basically understanding what are the activities that we do with that time? What do we spend our time on every day? Okay, so a research was carried out by the Harvard Business Review that shows a typical day of a software engineer. What do we spend our time on every day? Now, I don't necessarily agree with all this charts that I'm seeing right now, but I think from the review that was done, from the survey that was done on a lot of people, they're able to have an aggregate of a typical day of a software engineer. So from this chart, you can see that the largest amount of time that we spend in a day is spent managing across. Managing across simply means that we're trying to support other engineers in other teams within the company. So for example, as a QA engineer, you're supporting the devs, you're supporting the product managers, you're supporting the customer service reps in the company. So we spend most of our time in the day managing across. Next on the charts is the desk-based work, the desk-based work. So we spend 30% of our time doing tasks that are actually assigned to us. So at the beginning of each quarter, most of us have we have the rules, we have the key objectives that we're meant to meet at the end of the quarter, and then we spend this time carrying out those desk-based work every day. Next on the charts is facing the external facing work, where we support requests coming in from our external customers and partners from other companies. And then next we have managing down, which is the time that we spend supporting our subordinates and then helping people that are junior to us to learn the tasks that they're meant to do for the day. 7% of our time is spent managing up, which is the time that we spend supporting our supervisors in the company, while just 1% is spent in training and development, which I think should be more in my own perspective. So from this research, you can see how long or how much time in a day initially that we spend on each activity. Right, so next we need to understand the types of activities so that we can also understand how to prioritize such activities. Now, activities they could be popularly categorized into two. The effort-driven activities. So these are activities that require a lot of effort, and then you can simply speed their completion by adding more effort to the activity. For example, while you're trying to paint a wall, all you have to do is get more painters to get the job done. While you're trying to print several pages of paper, you can get more printers to get the job done. However, this kind of activity, we have to understand that it suffers from the law of diminishing returns, which means that even if you add more effort into that activity, you might not get your result on time because people keep getting on each other's way. And then you have people waiting for others to have their task done. For example, in a software engineering department, you have the devs trying to get the product ready, trying to get a feature ready. As a QA engineer, no matter how many QA engineers you add to that team, you still need the devs to finish up with the products before it's ready for you to test. So you have people waiting for others and getting in each other's way. Another drawback to this is the cost of the task due to more labor. So the more people you try to hire to get the task done, the more expensive it is to manage the costs. The other type of activity is the fixed duration activity. So this isn't affected by how much effort you try to add to it. There's going to be a fixed time for you to complete such an event. For example, software testing. We already discussed how adding more people to that team doesn't mean that you get to test the software application on time. You still need to have the devs follow the normal process structure in the development lifecycle before a QA engineer can pick up that task to test. Also, installing a software application also might require a fixed duration of time before you can finish up the installation. And from the example we gave in the previous type of activity, so even when you employ a large number of people to paint a wall, you still need a fixed duration for that paint to dry. And the same thing goes for baking a cake. It requires a fixed amount of time for the cake to be done. No matter how many ovens that you get to bake the cake, you still need to have a fixed duration of time to get the cake done. So when you understand this type of activities, you begin to also understand how to prioritize and schedule your time to be able to complete this type of activities. Another important thing to address is trying to understand the difference between efficiency and productivity. Now, when you're able to understand that, you can begin to apply your knowledge in identifying the low value task in your set of activities. Now, once you're able to identify the low value task, which we'll discuss later on in this webinar, once you identify the low value task, you need to stop doing them, or you get someone else to do them. You can also redesign the process or work in doing them, and then once it becomes repeatable, you also develop a process of carrying out such tasks. An example is having to automate your software adoption testing. So once that process is repeatable, it's stable, it's something that is easily predictable as well, you can develop a process of automating such tests. We also need to understand how to assess a task in order to prioritize them. You need to know how valuable they are to your organization. You need to also understand if you're required to do such tasks, because The task might be valuable to the organization, but you might not be the right person to do it. So you also need to understand and ask yourself if you're the right person and if you're required to do such task. You also need to understand how much personal value the task has to offer to you. So you might be doing your daily task, but not getting that satisfaction. You might not be getting that personal value added to you. You don't feel like you learned something at the end of the day. So you need to be able to assess that task that you're doing if it means something to you. And then also ask yourself if you can delegate that task, if you can pass on the task to your subordinates so they can spend your time on doing something more valuable to you and to the company. Now, time management is self-discipline. It is because time management is, we have a limited amount of time each day, and we need to be able to follow some steps so that we can allocate our times to our tasks that need to be completed at the end of the day. You need to have that self-discipline to be able to manage the amount of time that you spend on the internet, the amount of time that you spend having the office chit chat, having ad hoc meetings. Now, I know a lot of us are already working remotely, but while some are also going back to the office, that also comes with a lot of distractions. For example, you're going to the cafeteria, you're going to the restroom, your colleague might stop you on the way and try to discuss what was done in the previous day. And before you know it, you already spent 30 minutes, 1 hour discussing while working somewhere else. And then that's already taken out of the time that you have in the day to complete your task. So you need to be able to have that self-discipline to balance your social interactions with your daily responsibilities and then determine what's the best use of your time at that moment. Okay, self-discipline is paramount to the sense that you need to have that self-commitment to get things done. You need to have that self-discipline to focus on the results. If you have a lot of tasks that have to be done in a day, having that focus on the end game, on the results, and on the objectives of what you intend to achieve on that task also gives you that self-discipline to be able to focus on that task. And also not forget to prioritize your task and then have that system in place to help you to consistently do the work. We're going to start discussing about what kind of system you can adopt and then find the one that works for you. Okay, so develop a system. Now, define your work. So every day, for example, in an agile environment, we have stand-ups, right? Which at the beginning of the day, you already know what you want to accomplish by that day. Why not go further and take it up until the end of the week? So have the task that you want to achieve by the end of the week. This way, you can capture all the actions that have to be completed at the end of the week. Once you've done that, develop a system to identify what is urgent and what is important. So if you're able to identify what is urgent, it means that it requires an immediate attention. And if something that is important means that it impacts the organization, it might not be urgent, but it impacts the organization. So you need to find a way to schedule what you actually want to do at that very point in time. So one of the systems that I came across is that you need to be able to find answers to the following questions. So while you're developing the system or you're adopting the system, you need to ask yourself the kind of work that you're doing, who does it affect, and how does it affect your work? You need to also ask the question, if the work results in a dependency, is there someone else in the company or is there someone else in the team that requires the results of the work that you're doing? And what's the value of completing that work? So those questions will help you to also adopt a system. One of the systems that I came across is the Eisenhower Matrix. Now, this is a matrix that helps you to decide what you want to do. Now, from what we discussed in the previous slides, you can see that you need to identify what is important and what is urgent, and then have a matrix where you can now put in those tasks in each of the cells. Now, if something is important and it's urgent, it means you have to do it now. So if it's a task that is valuable to your company and answers the question of who is depending on that task, if others are depending on that task, that means that it's important and it's urgent. So you have to do it now. But if it's something that is important, but it's not urgent, then hey, why not schedule it? You don't have to do it now. You can just schedule it to do it at another day or at the end of the week. Now, if it's a task that is urgent but not important, it means that you can actually get someone else to do it for you. You can delegate the task. You can find someone in your team or a subordinate to do the task for you, or under your guidance and your supervision. So you can share articles, you can share notes on how to get the task done because it's urgent but not important. So if it's, sorry, do I have a question there? Okay, so if it's a task that is not important and it's not urgent, then we can just delete the task. We can eliminate the task. So if it's something that has to do with checking your junk email, checking social media, I mean, nobody's relying on that task to be done, and it's not important to you or your company. So you can eliminate that task from the list of tasks that you have for that week. Okay, so another system you can adopt is called the Parento technique. And that principle simply states that 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. So if you try to relate this to our environment, you realize that 20% of the problems take up 80% of our time. I'm sure from your experience working as engineers or in other environments, you realize that there are some tasks in the company that take up 80% of our time and requires only 20% of the workers to get them done, because they generate 80% of the results and 80% of the revenue. So these are the tasks that we need to prioritize based on this Parento's principle. Now, in order to adopt this principle, we need to have a list of 10 tasks. They could be 10, they could be 100, they could be 50, but adopt this ratio in such that the top 2 tasks are most vital to the company. They are most vital in the sense that they are important and they are urgent. So identify these 2 tasks. These are the tasks that have to be done immediately, while the rest of the tasks are not that important. You can schedule them to be done later, or you can delegate someone else to do it for you. So once you prioritize this task based on this principle, you can identify the ones that are effort-driven, that require the largest efforts, and that also the most important tasks to the company. So once you're able to do that, you can also can also pick up the quality of knowing which ones are more productive and also more efficient to driving down the objectives of the company. Once you're able to adopt this to that top 20, you simply push down the rest because they're trivial and can be delegated to someone else to do it. Right. Another system you should adopt is try to be unavailable. So as some of us are going back to the office, you realize that once you are at your desk, you have people always walking around to come and reach you to ask for help, to help them resolve an issue. So if you're trying to finish up this 20% of the task that is most vital to your company, you have to find a way to be unavailable. One of the things you can do is to try to work remotely or off-site, or even use the company cafeteria. Now, doing this makes you find that time and space to concentrate on your work without having people distracting you or calling you at the time where you need to actually get the work done. You can also find an empty training room in the company or schedule a conference room for yourself in such a way that people assume that you're busy. Well, you are busy, so it's not really an assumption, but find a conference room for yourself for you to work at that allocated time for yourself, and then you realize that you're able to accomplish that task at that particular time. You can also schedule that time for your prioritized work. So you have a calendar for yourself, have a schedule of that work that you want to get done, have that time in the day for you so that people know that you're actually busy and you're working on something and they don't have to distract you. You can also just create a meeting with yourself. So creating a meeting with yourself, let others know that, hey, this time is taken for this particular person, and then you don't have to call that person up for another meeting or for another discussion. Another thing that you can do is have your phone switched off and close your emails. These are quite a big source of distraction that you can actually just turn them off to allow you to focus on your task for the day. Another system that you should adopt is having to understand how to manage meetings. Now, have a look at the scenario. When you have 8 people in a room for an hour, most people will think that, hey, it's only just that 1 hour of lost productivity. But that is wrong. That's actually a total of 8 hours of lost productivity. And time is quite valuable to every company. So when you're having the meeting, you have to understand that the number of people that you invited for that meeting also influences and affects the number of hours of productivity that is lost by that company. So in order to minimize and manage this meeting, we need to make them more productive by preparing them well ahead. So set the goals and have the time limits. Communicate the agenda and share with everyone that was invited for that meeting. And then have a control of the meeting space. There has to be someone that's going to facilitate the meeting so that everyone can able to move at an agreed pace without wasting too much time on other topics. And then have a conclusion. Finalize your actions, assign tasks to people that were in the meeting and to those that were also not in the meeting. Let's have a final conclusion on what has to be achieved on the next scheduled meeting, so that can also be well prepared ahead before the next meeting starts. Now, understand something. When you're invited to a meeting, you need to understand if you're actually obligated to attend. Does the meeting have value to you? Because really the value of that meeting is in the results. So it's the results that you're actually looking forward to in the meeting. So you can also ask yourself that do you have to be in that meeting? What's the purpose of you being in that meeting, and what can you bring before you start so that you can have that you can be able to prepare yourself well ahead and contribute positively to that meeting. Now, in addition to this, you can carry out these following steps to also manage your meeting. Understand that being precise is better. Now, have the agenda of what you want to achieve in a meeting and then box them in a time such that once the timer is up for that particular agenda, you move on to the next so that you don't waste too much time on a particular topic. And then at the end of the meeting, you're going to be unable to complete what you actually came to do. Now, also understand that you only need to invite those that actually matter for that meeting, because by adding so many people to that meeting, not only do you have that work productivity being lost, but you're also increasing the number of communication channels to that meeting. So for example, if you have 10 people in a meeting, especially if it's a meeting that involves physical interaction, you're creating a total connection channel of 45. And then that also leads to a lot of chatter, a lot of discussions, and that distracts the goal of what you're trying to achieve in that meeting. And at the end, define the goals, have an agenda, know why you're there, and then get to it. Once you have that agenda, just get to it and start the meeting without wasting too much time. Now, last on the topic today is having a budget for our time. We need to be able to take an inventory. So just as you have a budget of how much you want to spend in a month, in a week, in a day, why not do the same thing for your time? Time is quite limited. So take an inventory of all the tasks that you want to get done in a day, including meetings, your work, your desk-based tasks, the events that you have to get to, and even commutes, because when you're going to work as well, you spend time committing to the work and getting back home, or even try to attend meetings outside the office. So you have to be able to take an inventory of all the things that you do in the day, and then create a budget. Try to understand how many work hours you have in the day. Some of us work 7, 8, 9 hours in a day. Have that budget of how many hours of work you have in a day, and then calculate the amount of time that you spend on each of those tasks that you've listed above. Now, once you do that, track your time. So add up all those tasks that you have done, or that you have, or that you have planned to do for that day, and then add up the time together, and then try to compare them with the amount of time that you were assigned to do for that day and that job, and then compare and see if the hours add up. Now, ask yourself these questions. If they don't add up, now, if they don't add up, so that means that the hours have either exceeded the time that you have for that day, or they are below the expectation for that day. So ask yourself the questions: where did the extra hours go? Where did they come from? So if you're spending too much time on your task for that day, that means that extra hours have come in for the budget that you have for that day. So you need to look at the task that you're spending the bulk of your time on and see how you can reduce that amount of time, so you'll be able to have time to complete the other tasks that you've already budgeted to complete for that day. And then from then on, you begin to understand how valuable your time is to the organization. So from that as well, you also know if your self-worth to that company. So if you're able to close a task in a particular time, you begin to know, hey, it's how much I charge per hour, for the task for that day. And if I'm able to achieve this task under this amount of time that I've allocated to myself, then I know what my worth is to that organization. And then you can begin to adjust your time budget for the next week. So let's say you've spent too much time on a certain task this week, it also gives you that information on how to adjust your time budget for the next week. And once you have a process that works for you, simply repeat this process for the following weeks, because the goal here is to be more efficient with your time and manage your time effectively. So I'm going to leave you with this image called time work rules. So I don't know if you've seen this before, but try to picture this. So this jar is the time that you have for your day. The rocks are the most critical tasks that are urgent and important. The sand are the less important tasks that have to be completed, at the end of the day. And then the water is the trivial task that could be discarded. So if you have rock, sand, and water, and you're trying to ensure that you get it done by the end of the day, in this sense, you're trying to fill up the jar. So what you have to do here first, now let's take, for example, you fill the jar up with water first. The water settles at the bottom of the jar. And then when you try to add sand to it, the sand also dissolves, or might not dissolve, might still settle at the bottom of the jar. But by the time you add the rocks, because the sand is already at the bottom, the rocks get pushed up, and then you're unable to close the jar, meaning you're unable to finish your task at the end of the day. So from all the systems that we've talked about, the best method to adopt here is to fill the jar with the rocks first. The rocks go to the bottom, and then you can fill the jar with the sand. The sand tries to fill up the empty spaces in the jar, and then finally you can now add water to the jar. And then if you add water, because the rocks are already at the bottom, the water simply tries to fill up the empty spaces, which are the little times that you have that you're able to carry out the triple task. And if you adopt this method, you see that you're able to fill up the jar. And even if you can't fill up the jar, you can still simply discard the water, which is less of a value to the organization, and you are able to complete the most valuable task for the day. So take out here for this webinar is to understand how to manage our time and get the most important things done, because our time is very limited and we need to be able to understand how to manage our time every day and have a process that we can adopt and adjust and then repeat the process for the following week to get our work done. All right, so that's it for me. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. So taking questions for anyone. And yes, if you want to check out more on this course, you can find out time and task management by Joseph